Do you think the Gill-man is just another Hollywood monster? A fictional creature dreamed up by Universal Studios in the 1950s to sell movie tickets? What if I told you the truth has been carefully buried beneath decades of entertainment? That the studio's famous monster was actually based on classified government files that were never meant to see the light of day? The story begins in 1923, not in a Hollywood writer's room, but in the murky depths of the Amazon River Basin. A privately funded expedition, led by Dr. Emmett Holloway of the Cambridge Institute of Anthropological Studies, ventured into uncharted territory in search of undiscovered amphibian species. What they found would never appear in any scientific journal. According to sealed documents that were only declassified in 2004, the expedition disappeared for 3 weeks. When they finally emerged from the jungle, 3 members were missing. Dr. Holloway's journal, portions of which were immediately classified by the U.S. State Department, described finding a subspecies of amphibious humanoid unlike anything documented in evolutionary science. His detailed sketches showed a creature with scales, gills, and distinctly human-like features. The official report stated the missing researchers died from tropical disease. Their bodies were never recovered. The remaining expedition members were separated upon return and signed extensive non-disclosure agreements. Dr. Holloway died 6 months later of heart failure. He was 42 years old and had no prior history of cardiac issues. His assistant, Margaret Simmons, attempted to publish portions of their findings in 1926. Her manuscript was seized by federal agents. She was committed to Riverside Psychiatric Hospital in New York 2 weeks later, diagnosed with delusional parasitosis and hysterical aquatic hallucinations. Her medical records describe her screaming about the things watching from the water. She remained institutionalized until her death in 1951. Meanwhile, the specimens collected by the Holloway expedition were transferred to a naval research facility in Maryland. All official records indicate they were preserved aquatic organisms of conventional taxonomy. But internal memos, now partially declassified, tell a different story. One communication from Commander Walter Preston to the Office of Naval Intelligence, dated January 17, 1924, mentions regenerative tissue samples exhibiting properties inconsistent with known biological paradigms. Between 1924 and 1938, the U.S. Navy financed 7 more expeditions to the same region of the Amazon. All records of these missions remain classified. However, shipping manifests indicate that specialized containment tanks and biological preservation equipment were sent to the region. Return shipments were handled under diplomatic seal. In 1938, 3 villages along a remote tributary of the Amazon were found abandoned. Brazilian authorities reported that approximately 200 inhabitants had vanished without explanation. Personal belongings remained in homes. Food was still on tables. No signs of violence, disease, or mass exodus were evident. The official explanation blamed indigenous migration patterns. The case was closed within 2 weeks. But a local missionary, Father Tomás Aguirre, wrote in his private correspondence to the Vatican, "The river has taken them." The people spoke for weeks of eyes watching from the water, of scaled hands reaching onto shorelines at night. They believed the old gods had returned. I dismissed their fears as superstition. I was wrong. Father Aguirre's body was found 3 months later, his small boat capsized on the river. The autopsy report noted unusual lacerations inconsistent with drowning or crocodile attack. This report was sealed by Brazilian military officials and only came to light in 1987 when a fire damaged the archives in Manaus. During World War II, attention shifted away from the Amazon. But something strange happened in 1944 that few people know about. A German U-boat, the U-598, was found abandoned off the coast of Brazil. The entire crew had vanished. The submarine was intact. No signs of combat damage, no explanation for why the crew would abandon a functioning vessel. The commander's log contained only one cryptic final entry. Sie kommen aus dem Wasser. Gott helf uns. Translation: They come from the water. God help us. The incident was attributed to stress-induced mass psychosis. The U-boat was quietly towed to an American naval base. According to declassified shipping records, several biological containment units were offloaded and transported to a facility in Nevada. In 1953, Universal Studios released Creature from the Black Lagoon, introducing the Gill-man to American audiences. The studio claimed the monster was inspired by ancient Amazonian legends, but the film's original production designer, Millicent Harper, left the project abruptly during pre-production. She never worked in Hollywood again. Her family reported she suffered from severe paranoia and night terrors. Before her death in 1976, she told her daughter, "They showed us photographs, not drawings, photographs. They said it was a costume design, but costumes don't have eyes that follow you." 3 of the special effects artists who worked on the Gill-man design died under unusual circumstances within 5 years of the film's release. 2 from drowning, 1 from what was ruled a home invasion. No suspects were ever identified, despite the fact that nothing was stolen from the residence. The film's success spawned sequels, merchandise, and eventually made the Gill-man one of Universal's classic movie monsters alongside Dracula and Frankenstein's creation. The perfect cover. Fiction hiding fact in plain sight. Ask yourself, what better way to discredit actual sightings than by turning them into entertainment? Between 1955 and 1968, 27 separate incidents were reported along the eastern seaboard of the United States involving unidentified aquatic humanoids. Most were dismissed as hoaxes inspired by the popular film. Others were explained away as misidentified conventional marine life. Several witnesses were discredited through character assassination or psychiatric evaluation. The pattern was always the same. Sightings began in a localized area, usually near water treatment facilities, research centers, or military installations. Local authorities would dismiss reports. Federal agencies would arrive. Witnesses would recant or disappear from public view. The sightings would stop until they began again elsewhere. In 1959, Dr. Robert Marsh, a marine biologist at the Oceanographic Institute in Florida, published a paper titled Evolutionary Divergence in Amphibious Humanoid Speculation, a Scientific Perspective. The paper methodically outlined the biological possibility of human-amphibian evolutionary branches, citing unusual genetic markers found in isolated indigenous populations near major river systems in South America. The paper was retracted 2 weeks after publication. Dr. Marsh issued a formal apology citing methodological errors. He resigned his position and disappeared from the scientific community. His family reported he had taken a private sector position. No employment records have ever been found. His Social Security number shows no activity after 1960. In 1962, during the height of Cold War tensions, a Soviet submarine in the North Atlantic reported an encounter with unknown biological entities of humanoid configuration with aquatic adaptations. This report, only revealed after the fall of the Soviet Union, described creatures matching the Gill-man's appearance surrounding the submarine at a depth of 400 meters. The commander ordered an emergency surface maneuver. 3 crew members were lost during the rapid ascent. The Soviet military classified the incident as an American psychological warfare operation. The KGB began its own investigation into similar reports from their naval forces. According to defectors, they established a special research division dedicated to what they termed aquatic evolutionary divergence. Meanwhile, the U.S. military expanded underwater testing programs. Between 1964 and 1978, naval expenditures on deep-sea biological research increased by 300%. Officially, this was explained as standard Cold War marine biology. Internal budgets, however, show a separate black budget item labeled Project Ichthys, that consumed nearly 40% of these resources. A naval research vessel, the USS Corsair, disappeared in the Puerto Rico Trench in 1971. All hands lost. The official explanation cited catastrophic hull failure, but a sonar operator on a nearby submarine reported hearing non-cetacean bioacoustic signatures immediately before the Corsair's disappearance. His testimony was stricken from the record. He was reassigned to a land-based facility in the Midwest. In 1972, a commercial fishing vessel off the coast of Maine pulled up something unusual in their nets. The captain described it as humanoid, but with gills and scales. Before they could return to shore, they were intercepted by a Coast Guard vessel. Their catch was confiscated. The crew was detained for 3 days and questioned separately. Upon release, they were told that discussing the incident would result in federal charges under newly expanded national security laws. The captain, Harold Winters, violated this order in 1976 when he spoke to a local newspaper reporter. The story never ran. The reporter's notes were confiscated in what was officially reported as a burglary. Winters' fishing license was revoked. 2 weeks later, his boat sank while moored in the harbor. The cause was never determined. Throughout the 1980s, reports became more sporadic but more disturbing. A pattern emerged of not just sightings, but interactions. In Boothbay Harbor, Maine, 3 children reported being watched by the fish-man while swimming. One child, 8-year-old Timothy Gardner, disappeared 2 days later while playing near the shore. His body was never recovered. The official explanation was accidental drowning. Timothy's mother, Eleanor Gardner, began collecting similar reports from coastal communities. She identified 37 cases of children vanishing near bodies of water between 1979 and 1985. All cases where no body was recovered, all dismissed as tragic drownings. She self-published her findings in a book titled Taken by the Waters in 1986. The book sold fewer than 500 copies before the publisher mysteriously went out of business. Mrs. Gardner continued her research independently until 1988, when she was killed in what police ruled a hit-and-run accident. Her research materials were destroyed in a house fire 3 days after her death. The fire was attributed to faulty wiring. In 1989, a marine research station in the Gulf of Mexico recorded unusual underwater vocalizations. The sounds were described as neither fully cetacean nor recognizably human, but containing elements of both. The recordings were sent to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration for analysis. They were never returned. The official response stated that the sounds were the result of equipment malfunction and acoustic interference. Dr. James Fulton, who headed the research station, disputed this explanation. He petitioned for the return of the original recordings. 3 months later, he was found dead in his home. Drowning was listed as the cause of death. His body was discovered in his bathroom in a tub filled with salt water. The medical examiner noted unexplained lacerations on his neck and shoulders. These details were redacted from the public report. The 1990s brought the dawn of the internet and with it, new methods of information control. As civilian access to underwater exploration technology expanded, so did reports of unusual sightings. But now, these reports were easily dismissed as digital hoaxes or internet folklore. Any photographic or video evidence could be discredited as primitive CGI or creative editing. Yet, the pattern continued. In 1995, 6 divers disappeared during an expedition to a previously unexplored underwater cave system in the Yucatan Peninsula. The Mexican government initially reported the incident as a tragic case of diver disorientation. However, one of the support team members, Marco Rodriguez, claimed the last radio communication included panicked references to humanoid figures approaching from deeper in the cave system. Rodriguez disappeared 3 weeks later while driving along a coastal highway. His vehicle was recovered abandoned with the driver's door open. There were no signs of foul play. The case remains unsolved. By the early 2000s, government agencies had developed a new approach. Rather than suppressing sightings, they began actively encouraging association with fictional entertainment. The Sci-Fi Channel, now SI-FI, produced several documentary-style programs about aquatic cryptids. These shows mixed actual witness testimony with obviously fake evidence, effectively tainting legitimate accounts by association. Meanwhile, pharmaceutical companies began showing unusual interest in amphibian genetics. Between 2001 and 2010, research patents related to regenerative properties in amphibian tissue increased by 600%. Most of this research was conducted by subsidiaries of companies with significant defense contracts. The public-facing explanations centered on medical applications. Internal documents leaked in 2014 revealed military applications including enhanced tissue recovery for combat operations. In 2008, Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans. Amid the chaos of the natural disaster, several unusual incidents went largely unreported. In the flooded lower Ninth Ward, emergency responders recorded multiple calls describing scaled figures moving through the water. These reports were officially attributed to stress, trauma, and alligator sightings. However, internal FEMA communications, later obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests, referenced establishing a containment protocol for Category E biological entities in the aftermath of the flooding. All references to this protocol were redacted in the public release of documents. 3 National Guard members who participated in rescue operations in the most heavily flooded areas were given dishonorable discharges after violating non-disclosure agreements. The content of their disclosures has never been made public. 2 subsequently died by suicide. The third, Staff Sergeant Marcus Williams, disappeared in 2011 while working as a commercial fisherman in the Gulf of Mexico. The Deepwater Horizon oil spill in 2010 created another crisis in the Gulf. Among the thousands of cleanup workers, several reported unusual biological activity around the edges of the spill. These reports were buried under the overwhelming volume of environmental data being collected. But isolated segments of video footage from ROV, remotely operated vehicles, monitoring the underwater oil plume captured what appears to be organized movement patterns inconsistent with known marine species. A BP contractor who attempted to preserve this footage had his security clearance revoked. The footage itself was classified under broad environmental security protocols. BP later issued a statement attributing the anomalies to methane bubble effects on camera sensors. As deep-sea exploration technology improved, agencies worldwide developed new methods of restricting civilian access to certain ocean regions. The creation of marine protected areas served dual purposes: legitimate conservation and control of who could access specific underwater locations. Between 2012 and 2018, 17 experienced deep-sea divers died in separate incidents while exploring cave systems underwater. Structures or deep trenches, all were ruled as accidents resulting from equipment failure or diver error. Yet in 14 of these cases, the victims had previously reported unusual discoveries in online forums or to colleagues. Their equipment was never recovered. In 2015, a submarine drone operated by the Schmidt Ocean Institute captured images of what appeared to be artificial structures at a depth of 6,000 feet in the Puerto Rico Trench. The institute announced plans to conduct further investigation with advanced equipment. Before this could occur, their research vessel experienced catastrophic engine failure while in port. The replacement expedition was canceled due to funding issues. When the footage was finally released 6 months later, the segments containing the anomalous structures were missing. The institute issued a statement claiming data corruption affected portions of the recording. 3 of their senior researchers resigned without public comment in the following weeks. The pattern has continued into recent years, becoming more sophisticated as technology evolves. Facial recognition software and artificial intelligence now scan social media for credible sighting reports. Accounts sharing such content often experience technical difficulties or content removal for community standard violations. In 2019, marine biologist Dr. Elena Vasquez published research on evolutionary convergence in marine species, displaying unusual genetic markers consistent with accelerated adaptation. Her work specifically avoided any reference to humanoid characteristics, focusing instead on certain fish species with unexplained genetic anomalies. Nevertheless, her research funding was cut. Her laboratory at the University of Miami suffered a catastrophic flooding event that destroyed her specimens and data. She now works in pharmaceutical research. Her focus entirely shifted from evolutionary biology. During the early pandemic lockdowns of 2020, with human activity along coastlines drastically reduced, reports of unusual sightings increased dramatically. Most were dismissed as the results of isolation, stress, and increased consumption of conspiracy content online. But coastal monitoring stations from multiple countries recorded unprecedented movements of large biological entities in deep water channels, some approaching shores that would normally be heavily trafficked. A data analyst at NOAA, who compiled these anomalies, was placed on administrative leave for misuse of monitoring systems. The compiled data was never published. In 2022, advanced sonar mapping of the Mariana Trench revealed what appeared to be artificial structures at depths previously thought incapable of supporting construction. Before detailed examination could occur, the research vessel experienced a critical navigation system failure and was forced to return to port. Subsequent attempts to revisit the exact coordinates have been prevented by a series of technical failures, funding issues, and most recently, the establishment of a marine conservation zone restricting access. Today, the official position remains unchanged. The Gill-man is fiction, a movie monster, nothing more. But ask yourself this: why has every major studio attempted remakes of Creature from the Black Lagoon, only to abandon them during production? Why did 3 separate screenwriters working on different adaptations quit the industry entirely? Why did concept artist Julian Mercer disappear for 6 months after completing design work for the most recent attempted remake, only to return with no memory of his absence? The truth remains hidden in classified files, redacted documents, and beneath the dark waters of our oceans and rivers. The Gill-man wasn't created by Universal Studios. They were simply the first to put a commercial face on something the government needed to hide. A convenient fiction to discredit the inconvenient truth. And that truth is more disturbing than any horror film. Evidence suggests these creatures aren't some evolutionary offshoot or undiscovered species. The classified Holloway journals, portions of which were leaked online in 2017 before being scrubbed from the internet within hours, suggested a more terrifying possibility. They were here first. The oceans cover 71% of our planet. We've explored less than 5% of their depths. We are not the dominant species on Earth. We simply claimed the 29% they didn't want. But their domain is expanding. Sea levels are rising. Coastal populations are growing. The creatures are being encountered more frequently, not because their numbers are increasing, but because our worlds are colliding. The disappearances continue. Each year, approximately 100,000 people vanish under unexplained circumstances worldwide. Many are eventually found or explained away, but thousands remain missing. How many disappeared near bodies of water? How many were last seen on beaches, lakeshores, or riverbanks? The data exists, but no one is connecting the dots, or those who try suffer consequences. Just last month, 3 teenagers disappeared while night swimming off a beach in Florida. Their belongings were found neatly placed on the shore. No signs of distress, no evidence of drowning. The official explanation cited rip currents, despite calm sea conditions that night. Local reports of eyes reflecting in the water were dismissed as hysteria. The investigation was closed within a week. But perhaps the most disturbing development is the most recent. Advanced genetic testing has revealed unusual markers in certain coastal populations, subtle mutations not present in inland communities. These changes are consistent with genetic adaptation to aquatic environments. They appear to be accelerating in younger generations. What does this mean? Are they becoming more like us, or are we becoming more like them? Is there an exchange happening beneath the surface of our awareness? Ask yourself why. Genetic research companies have been quietly collecting DNA samples from specific coastal communities for the past decade. The Gill-man isn't just real. It may be our future. Now you know what they've been hiding. The question is, what will you do with this information? Will you dismiss it as another internet conspiracy theory? Or will you start noticing patterns? Will you question why certain beaches close without explanation? Why some coastal towns have disproportionate missing person statistics? Why deep-sea research remains so heavily classified? And most importantly, the next time you're near the water and you feel eyes watching you from beneath the surface, will you remember this warning? They're watching. Always watching. From the water's edge. From the depths. They've been patient for millennia. They can wait a little longer. If you've made it this far, you're now part of this story. They notice those who notice them. Type "I see beneath the surface" in the comments if you've reached this point. Let others know you've glimpsed the truth. The water calls to all of us. We came from it, evolutionarily speaking. Perhaps something is calling us back. Something with scales and gills and eyes that have watched us since before we walked on land. Listen carefully the next time you're near the ocean. That's not just the sound of waves you're hearing, it's breathing.